Art Bazaar. I'm Brandon Wonder, co-founder and creative director of the Alternative Gallery, a nonprofit arts organization in Allentown, PA. And this is the premiere episode of our podcast, The Art Bazaar. Being that this is our first episode, we felt it was necessary to bring together the co-founders to discuss all things Alternative Gallery. What the Alternative Gallery is, or AG as you'll often hear us call it, how we started it, why we started it, and how you can start your own. We'll explain how we went from running our gallery in a public hallway of a hotel to operating out of what can only be considered an art castle. And these sweet sounds you're hearing in the background are from Bear Sloth, right here from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Some funky grooves recorded live right here at the Alternative Gallery. And with me are the two other co-founders of the organization, who I'm going to ask to introduce themselves at this time.
What's up, guys? It's Jay Echeverria. I'm a co-founder of the Alternative Gallery. I've been a contemporary figurative artist for the past 15 years. It's what I do full-time. I'd say my style ranges from portraits to digital art and, more recently, comics.
And I'm Rob Riegel. I'm the gallery manager at the Alternative Gallery, also a co-founder, a creator of all sorts. But if you stop by and visit the gallery, you'll definitely see a lot of my work on canvas, some street art stuff, and some antique bike restoration projects that I currently have going on.
And as you'll hear from this podcast, the Alternative Gallery is a very multifaceted organization, not only in the mediums of art that it supports and works with, but in the type of people it interacts with and the type of interests it has and supports. And we were originally founded in June of 2012, so this past June we hit our 11th year in operation, so we're a decade plus one in. You know, it's getting serious now. We're the original co-founders. Everyone does this on a volunteer basis. We love what we do. There's nothing but heart in this, and we do this because us artists need a lot more support, and our community needs a lot more support, and art's just available and accessible to them. So obviously, being that we've existed for longer than a decade now, we've met and worked with some incredible people. And, you know, we want to spend time talking about those people and the experiences we've had with them. And, of course, we'll bring a lot of those people on in future episodes. And, you know, up front, it has to be stated that the reason we started the gallery was due to a lack of spaces that really catered to what we called at the time outsider art and culture. You know, I personally grew up with a lot of breakdancers and graffiti artists who were amazing. They were amazing at what they did, but it wasn't trendy yet in society. Traditional art galleries still kind of frowned upon graffiti and street art, and these amazing creators struggled to find a space to showcase their talents. And, you know, when you don't do that, you kind of force these guys to be illegal with what they do. And we wanted to see a compromise here where both these artists could get the support they needed and society would be more accepting of it. And, you know, the days before the Alternative Gallery, pre-2012, you know, it was a transition for the city of Allentown and Lehigh Valley in general. You had a lot of the music venues like Croc Rock were closing or shutting down, or little clubs and DIY art and music spaces were disappearing off the face of the map. So there was this need, and because we were about to face a huge leg of revitalization in our downtown here in the city, everything got pushed out, as it often does with big development. You know, I know they're trying to incorporate it more now, but back then us artists were kind of, you know, on the run, on the lam, nowhere to go. So I want to start by, you know, talking to Rob and Jay here about what life was like for them as artists before the gallery. Like, Rob, what kind of spaces were you showing in, and what were you doing prior to the Alternative Gallery?
Prior to the gallery, I mean, the types of spaces I would show in, I mean, the two that really stood out, there was my first show ever was in a small community theater in Bethlehem. Actually, Jay and I were both in that show. And I'm not exactly sure how we ended up getting that space, but it seemed to sort of be an afterthought or something that was tacked on to whatever it is that they already had going on. And, you know, even at the other spaces, you know, Artworks being the one in Allentown that really kind of got me exposed to the Allentown art scene proper. it was essentially a fast food restaurant during the day, and at night once a month they would have a small event where they would have people and show artwork, which was great. But it definitely was not. It was not something that I would consider a hub of arts and culture for the city. It was the same crowds all the time, and there was a lot of people that were taking quite a bit from the artists who were doing all of the hard work.
I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, with some of those spaces that double as art spaces. Like, obviously, you want to put art where people already are. But when the space isn't dedicated to the arts, where art is kind of an afterthought, it's usually not designed with the arts in mind, and therefore it seems to struggle in certain ways. So it's that fine line you have to walk. Jay, what about you? What kind of spaces were you working in, and what kind of stuff were you doing prior to the gallery?
Just like Rob said, we had a show at Touchstone Theater in Bethlehem, and it was a group show. I believe it was for a Halloween event. I'm not sure. Prior to us opening the gallery, I had shown in Bethlehem, Easton, Allentown. A lot of it I had to reach out to these people. There really weren't calls for this stuff. You kind of had to find it on your own or through word of mouth. I was painting in my basement, the very basement that, we had the idea for the gallery in, and Rob and I would work in there. He'd get off work and he'd come over and we'd paint. And, we were always looking for the next opportunity. And I think that that's part of why we started the gallery, obviously, is to create those opportunities, not just for ourselves, but rather more so for other people.
So would the both of you say that the area kind of lacked in opportunities, or at least you were unaware of the opportunities if there were any?
Yeah. A little bit of both.
Yeah, I feel like, there's a good combination of the two. I think at first, especially being a newer artist like myself, there was a lack of resources for newer artists. So even though the stuff was out there, if you were just breaking into the scene, it was very difficult to get involved.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we still hear a lot of now, not just in the Allentown and Lehigh Valley area, but artists from different cities, different parts of the country, sometimes even parts of the world, but United States more specifically. And I think that's something we've tried to combat, is that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of walking through for younger artists, newer artists. And, I see some artists kind of giving up before they even kind of get their feet beneath them. And for me, that was personally a huge thing that I wanted to see changed with the Alternative Gallery, is not only having more resources available to artists, including space and just general support and, brothers in arms, so to speak, with us artists in the trenches together, and more awareness of what opportunities might be there, even if it wasn't opportunities that we were giving out, things that we could find and just pass forward. And I know it's gotten a little bit better over the years, but in the 11 years since we started the gallery, it doesn't seem like many more art opportunities have unfortunately popped up, which has kind of made our jobs more difficult, which is something we're going to definitely unpack as we go, especially in this episode here. But me personally, I'm a filmmaker. It was always my dream to make movies. And obviously that's not a thing that's prevalent here in Allentown and Lehigh Valley, is a film scene, a movie making scene. So I ran off to New York when I was about 22 years old, trying to make films and, make a career in the film industry. And life, did its thing and forced me back to Allentown. There's that great saying, life is what happens when you're busy making plans. I had my plan, and that's not how things went. But it was kind of a blessing in disguise, being that it brought us all together, because when I returned to Allentown, again, obviously it wasn't really a hub for filmmaking, so I couldn't focus on that at the time. So between that and some of the projects I was working on in New York, I was kind of burnt out. I was burnt out on the collaborative projects. I wanted my own work, so I was focusing a lot at that time on my photography and my digital work. And I was trying to hustle my art and going to art shows and getting in any little art space that I could, finding festivals. And I kind of hit the same wall that the two of you did, with not really finding much. And the stuff I did, you either had to pay a monthly fee, or if anything did sell, it was a high cut. And, aside from that, I felt a lot of the spaces the slim pickings we had didn't really cater to our style or even maybe more importantly, our attitude.
Yeah, I remember places like Banana Factory. I had waited for years to show there. This was earlier in my art career, but it was like one of the first places that I was like, I gotta get in here. I gotta get in here. Finally, I got in and I realized that the art that surrounded mine, there was just such like a stark difference. And once I had shown there, it was like this great thing that I accomplished. But it was kind of sad because I felt alone in the style of work that I had. Yeah, and like you said, like just lack of places to show work.
Yeah, and I don't think that speaks, to any good or bad that Banana Factory had done. It's just supporting certain types of art.
Absolutely.
And we didn't really feel like that was our space, that was our audience. We still went there and hung out and support it, and a lot of the artists did the same. But there was something calling to us that we hadn't yet found. And we had all kind of, I guess, crossed paths at these same spaces. And, I remember seeing Rob's art online. I had seen some of Jay's art in person. And I had an opportunity to curate a show at one of the few spaces on Hamilton Street. And I reached out to both Rob and Jay. And, right away, these were, I believe, MySpace days, right?
Oh, I want to say so. Maybe.
Yeah.
You know what? No, I believe this was, you would have maybe seen, you definitely would have seen my work, maybe Rob's. We had that Facebook artist page.
Okay, yeah, so it was Facebook.
Oh, yeah,
Facebook.
for the artist den.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, right,
which
that's
was
right.
great when it was
We
up
made
and
a-
running.
Yeah,
Made a page for Jay's
That was one of the
basement.
benefits back then of Facebook, like being one of the only, because that's right, MySpace had just kind of like fizzled out and
Yeah.
Facebook was dominant, and that's where everyone was. Now I feel like social media is great, but I feel like there's so many options now that it's divided the audience. And, I feel like the both of you you said yes very quickly. Not out of desperation, maybe out of desperation, but just because there were so few opportunities. And I mean, I sensed early on that there was going to be a deeper connection here, not just because we were all looking for the same thing, but again, we had a similar spirit and we had a similar attitude. I mean, they've often described the alternative gallery as, punks, as rebellious, as fringe. I think all those things are true. And we're not trying to do anything for the sake of doing it. It's just an expression of who we are. So like me personally, anything that we done that was considered rebellious, it wasn't to be rebellious. It was because we thought that was the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
If you look at our business card or even the tagline for the gallery, it says, "Have you seen the alternative?" And yes, it's a double meaning. So yes, part of that is it's stating, have you been to the alternative gallery? Have you seen the alternative? But the other, I think, more deeper and important meaning is before you've like made up your mind, have you looked at the other options? Because I think a lot of people, they kind of just take whatever is presented directly in front of them. And sometimes that works out. But I think a lot of people, they just go down a path without really considering where it's going. Right? So I think, again, a lot of the stuff we experienced is what other artists experience wherever they're from. And I want this podcast to speak to those people. I want this podcast to speak to those artists, especially the young artists who are just getting their start, those artists that have a dream, those artists who may live in a town or a city that has no support for the arts, that might not have an art gallery, that might not have a central organizing body to help support creative endeavors.
Right.
I want those artists and those individuals to know that no matter where you are, especially now, thanks to the benefit of the internet, you can make it as an artist anywhere. You might not be able to show in your hometown or make art sales in your hometown, but you can create art in your hometown and you can connect with the rest of the world and make sales there.
Absolutely.
So I think we are incredibly fortunate to have that opportunity. I mean, this podcast, this is something we've discussed doing this almost since the beginning of AG.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
How great it would be, and we're always like, oh, maybe at this point, always waiting for that perfect moment. And I mean, looking back, I'm glad we waited
Yeah, definitely.
because now we have this experience. And
Right.
now we try to recap the experience and give our helpful advice to those maybe following in similar footsteps.
Right.
And the reason we started the gallery, in addition to everything we mentioned, was because the area just simply needed to be exposed to more art. And we didn't have any money. We didn't have any resources. All we had was our ambition. So we would get together. We would often meet in Jay's basement in Northampton, the little art den down
the
there.
little artist den, yeah.
Which, if you see the 10-year anniversary poster for the Alternative Gallery, that Jay did a mock-up of what the basement looked like. We'll have to make sure we share that with this episode. And we just kind of, that was like a layer of dreaming and plotting and figuring things out.
It was a very special time. We knew we had something big happening.
We knew we had something. We knew we needed something. And again, we knew we had no money.
That was number one on the list. We knew that before we knew anything else.
Well, and that's one of the benefits of artists. We define our boundaries and our resources, no matter how scarce they are, and we work with them. And we did in this situation. So knowing we had no money, we went from place to place to place, trying to find somewhere that would allow us to be an art gallery. And the place that we ended up doing it was actually at a hotel.
Of all places.
Of all
right?
places, in the hallway of a hotel. And it was, at the time, it was a Holiday Inn.
It was a nice hallway.
It was. It
Wow.
was the Maple Walk, it was called.
The carpet was gnarly.
carpet was
It's so
amazing.
cool.
It was a glass wall and a slanted glass ceiling. Towering above you was the PP&L building, our highest, our tallest, and the most iconic building here in the city of Allentown. And there was this real trippy psychedelic carpet. And every time I saw Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas after we started the gallery, it always reminded me of that carpet.
Nice.
But yeah, it was right there on 9th and Hamilton Street. I approached the hotel manager at the time, telling him of our ambition as artists and someone needing a creative space, and that they had this great hallway that wasn't being used for anything, and that we would like to showcase some artists and some artwork, and would they consider allowing us to do so? Well, I remember the guy at the time, whose name I'm not going to say because...
Let's leave that out of this.
Yeah, that's not important. He was confused. I don't know if he ever spoke to an artist prior. So he didn't really understand what I meant. He thought I wanted to throw a party. I'm like, well, kind of, but not really. With art in the wall and people hang out and you got a bar here, made in Brazil. Rest in peace, the great Made in Brazil.
The greatest.
In Brazil.
It was a restaurant attached to a hotel run by our Brazilian friends who are just amazing people. And it just completed the package of having the art gallery right next to a Brazilian bar and restaurant. And, eventually the hotel manager understood that us being there would drive traffic to the hotel, which at that time, Hamilton was a ghost town.
Absolutely.
I mean, it still kind of is, let's be honest.
Kind of is.
It's a ghost town now for different reasons, though. But it
Right.
was a super ghost town back then. And anything to try to get people in those doors, they were happy to do. Long story short, we got to go ahead and we started organizing our first art exhibition, which, Jay, right there next to you, is the flyer for the first art show ever.
Oh, yeah.
Saturday, June 16th, 2012. We called it the Summer Kickoff Art Show. And that was it. That was the first show. And we got a group of local artists that we loved, that fit the style and idea and spirit of what we were doing. And just like that, we had an art gallery. We still had no money, but we had an art gallery. And people were hungry for more. I remember that first show, we had a huge turnout.
Huge turnout.
Well over 100 people, which for
Definitely.
having 0 art shows ever to having 100, 200 people at a show is very significant.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of really interesting like clothing designers and vendors there. We had live music. It was incredible. And people wanted more. And that summer was a summer of insanity. If you remember, every 2 weeks we hosted a new art exhibition.
Yeah. Turning over shows.
Not to mention the
Twice a
wall
month.
that we hung
Yeah.
on was
Yeah.
Cinder
brick.
blocks.
It was cinder blocks, yes, which were at one time painted gold, but had since been painted some kind of off-white. But the gold was flaking through in many places. And there were some odd holes and random nails and screws that we tried to work with. And I remember the hotel manager at the time did not want us tapping into the walls, didn't want us putting anything up. Like, I mean, God forbid we ruin your precious cinder block. Like, the world doesn't have enough of that. There's nothing special about cinder block when it's art can be hung on it. You can patch it, you can fill it. If you're on the fence about drilling into your cinder block, just do it. So yeah, and I'll never forget how fun it was to hang on that. How we had to drill.
Fun's a word.
We burnt out a couple drills and tons of drill bits. And again, we were hanging a new show every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But people were hungry for it. They wanted it, and we were answering that.
That's right. And, you know, I think it needs to be stated, too, that as much excitement as there was for the initial startup of the gallery, there was also this arm of society which was kind of poking fun at us for trying to create an art space in a city that was so dead. Right. And I would explain to them, well, number one, this is a city I'm from, that's the city where I'm born, so I want to see better things for it. And number two, if no one steps up and creates an art space or creates anything, of course a place is always going to suck. We wanted it to be better. So, you know, one of my bits of advice out there to anyone that's listening, you know, if you're thinking about creating a space or starting anything up, I know they say location is everything, but it's really not. If you do something that is worthwhile, people will find you. They'll come to you. They'll support you. So if you're looking at a space right now and it's $2,500, but in prime location, and you find another space that's $800, it's cool, it could work, you could grow it into something bigger, but it's not really where you want to be, I'd say if you can, go with the smaller space.
Yeah. And why be one of, 10 galleries on a block in Miami when you could be, the coolest place in, I don't know, Poughkeepsie, New Jersey, like whatever, some small town that needs that kind of exposure to culture.
Even somewhere like Brooklyn, New York. The reason Brooklyn started popping off was because all the artists started getting pushed out of Manhattan because it was just too expensive. So they started going to areas with dilapidated buildings, and the artists built it up. But as often happens, artists make a place cool, developers take notice, they overdevelop it, and guess what? The artists can't afford to be there anymore. Rinse and repeat. The cycle continues. That's why I feel us artists are kind of nomads in a sense. We're getting pushed from one place to the next. And that is what we really try to change with the Alternative Gallery, was giving some sense of permanence where, you're not just in a location, or you don't just have a gallery for 5 or 10 years. It closes and someone has to come, start it again, and regain all that process. We wanted to build something that lasts. And I'll tell you what, the world has thrown everything in front of us to stop us. At best, all it's done is slow us down. But had we given up, people see how hard we've worked. I personally don't believe a lot of people would have taken up arms and started a new art space in this city, or even this part of the city, having seen us failed.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's a ton of work.
It's a ton of work.
So we're at this hotel, right? This is our first location. We, show after show, we're growing, we're expanding, and there's 2 retail spaces at the front of the hotel, street access, street level. And, we had our eye on it because we started getting it. The first stuff we started hanging in the gallery was obvious stuff: photos, prints, painting, things of that nature, wall art. Now, it's a little bit different when you start having jewelry and things like that. Again, we're in a public hallway. You can't just lock it and keep people out of it. So we would often show up, we'd set up our jewelry display and have to tear it back down and pack it away because we were concerned it was going to get stolen. We got tired of this pretty quick. So we set our eyes on one of those retail spaces there, which we eventually got, which was amazing. And in that retail space, I think that's when the AG really started to take formation of its first serious form, where we now have the gallery space and we have a retail space. So it really, really opened up not only what kind of art we can showcase, but who we could work with and what kind of events we could do.
Yeah, I think it was in that first space when, the night that always stands out was when the artists from Osaka, Japan visited, and there were like 12 of them and maybe another 10 or 12 of us all crammed into that tiny little space, and everyone was just having an amazing time. Like, all of the Allentown people were super amazed that, these creators from another country were really into what we were doing, and they were super amazed by everything they saw in this tiny little room. And yeah, that's kind of when you got the idea that something was really happening there. Like, maybe this thing is going to catch on.
But, again, we had no money, and we weren't able to pay rent for that retail space because, as great and fun as those art shows were, we were taking so little off of sales to benefit artists as much as we could. We weren't able to make enough money to pay rent there or anywhere else. And at the same time, this hotel manager, he was asking way too much for that space, a space that had no storage, no bathrooms. Anything that was happening in the hotel was directly affecting what was happening with our gallery. One major thing being, I don't know if you guys remember Hurricane Sandy. When Hurricane Sandy came and blasted the East Coast of the United States, and New York was under 15, 20 feet of water, and then a bunch of the victims from the hurricane who were displaced were actually put up by the Red Cross and other organizations at that hotel. So there was a period of about a week or so where we had all these displaced people at the Holiday Inn. It was completely booked out, and it was chaos. I remember the hotel got completely destroyed. The bathroom stalls got kicked apart. I think a urinal got tore off the wall. We had several pieces of art stolen. We had even more art damaged. So that was a huge concern for us. I mean, yeah, this is a great place to be because we're seen. We're on Hamilton Street in our center of our city, but we have no control of our space. And that was never going to last long term. That amplified by the issues that this guy was pressing more and more for us to pay rent for a retail space that he was asking 2, if not 3 times what rent should have been for there. We knew that our time was limited. And it came suddenly. I remember it was the first week of September. I had just gotten back from a family vacation. It was actually the last vacation I took for quite a few years after we started the gallery. And the manager told me, he's like, hey, I have somebody who wants to rent a space. You guys have to be out at the end of the month. So he gave us about 2 weeks to not only pack up our business, but find a new location and move it. And I remember those desperate moments after only being there for 15 months of trying to figure out how to keep the gallery open. We were just getting started, and here we were having the rug pulled from under our feet. It's about, shit's about to get shut down. And I went from every building owner I knew. I went to the construction companies. I went to City Center, who was a developer that now basically owns the downtown. Nobody was interested in helping us. I pled with everyone. So the best option we had at the time was a friend of mine. He owned a space on Hamilton Street that was unfinished, and he was going to allow us to use it to store the contents of our gallery. And that was a very depressing moment in my life because I really thought the gallery was gone, to such an extent that literally the day we were moving out of the hotel, we woke up thinking we were still moving in storage. So I remember it being a somber day. Everyone gets there. There's probably about a dozen vehicles or so, even more people helping us out, packing up. Everyone's kind of quiet, trying to stay upbeat, but, very somber, very depressing. And I had a meeting set that same morning with the building manager at the Cigar Factory on 4th and Tillman, North Allentown. And I thought it was a, too good to be true, lost cause kind of thing. Look, gallery's already done. It's moving day. There's no way this is going to go anywhere. So I came while everyone else was packing up and starting to put stuff in vehicles. I went on my own to North Allentown, and I had a meeting with the Cigar Factory building manager. I explained the situation. I explained who we were, what our ambitions were, and how I thought we could help this building, which was just opened a few months prior as artist studios, but there were basically no artists in here at all because they weren't tapped in with the art community, so the building was just kind of sitting here. I felt, you need us, and we need a space. So essentially what happened was I left that meeting with a key. And I went back so fast to just tell you guys and brag to you guys, guess what? You're not going to believe this. And I pulled the key out of my pocket, and I didn't have to say shit else because everyone knew what had happened. We just got a second shot at life here, right? So we pack up the vehicle faster and faster and faster, And then when everything was out, we took that great photo of everyone behind the
pressed
wall.
against the glass, yeah.
At the window.
I think that was I was in the hospital at the time, and I think I got that photo, and I cried, and I was like, oh my, because I'm here in the hospital, I'm like waiting for the updates, and I get this picture. I think it was from Bernie, and I was just like so stoked, so happy.
And I think too, like aside from like me and maybe 2 other people, I don't think anyone there had ever been to the Cigar Factory before.
What a place to come to.
So they had no idea what they were into. Again, keep in mind, we're leaving a hallway at a hotel in a really tiny retail space that seemed gigantic to us at first, but in the end was very tiny. And I'm like, all right, follow me, I guess. And everyone follows me. And we pull up in front of this old industrial building, which was originally a cigar factory. And everyone looks up. The building feels towering. And we're like, where the hell are we? And I opened the door to the retail space, Suite 103, and we walked in. And I think for some people, they couldn't tell it was real until the key worked in that door. And like, oh, okay, so there is another space.
Yeah,
okay.
There was a lot about that situation that didn't make any sense because we knew we had no money still, and like, okay, you can find a key anywhere, like,
yeah. Even though it was a security key, it's a do not copy. I mean, you can still get those places.
But yeah, until we physically got in the building and no one was there to kick us out, I think there was definitely a lot of people that didn't realize exactly what was happening.
So, I mean, think about this, the roller coaster. We wake up that morning thinking our gallery is done. We go from this little hotel hallway. Now we have a key to this art castle. And then the superintendent, the guy that took care of the building, we got everything moved in. We were so exhausted, but adrenaline was rushing, and we were just, I know me, I had in the back of my head, I got to see that roof. I want to see that view from up there. Like, what a moment to share with everyone, to look over your city from the top of a roof and celebrate your continued existence when you thought, today, I'm meeting the executioner today. I thought our gallery was gone. And then what happens? We convince the guy, we get up on the roof, we're having a drink, and then for like 3-4 blocks in all directions, blackout. All the power went out.
That's right.
And it was like, we're like, what the hell is going on? And then we go from the roof, and then we're like, we're starving. So we end up in the basement playing like beer pong in the emergency lights with a bunch of pizzas, and I'm like, what is life right now?
I love that.
I thought I was going into storage with all my stuff, but here we are doing this. So what do you have any insight to those initial experiences with coming to the Cigar Factory? Like, when you guys first came to Cigar Factory, like, what went through your mind? What did you see?
So I want to say one of my first experiences in the building was from the Fuse project.
That was my first experience here too. It's the only time I had been here aside from that meeting.
Yeah, so I had work in the show. It was a traveling pop-up. Were they Fuse?
Yeah, Fuse. Yeah, they do pop-up shows all around, and they were doing a residency here for a few months, and
Right.
we came like towards the end of the residency.
Right. So I had experience in the building, not the whole building. I just knew the one wing. And yeah, it was incredible to know, oh my God, we're in this building now. I just showed there. There's this big art show full of people, and to know that we have space there, it's like a permanent thing, like we're here. Like I had said, I was in the hospital, so I didn't get to share this exact moment, but after being in the hospital and coming here and like seeing because you guys had set everything up, so I walked into like the place looking like a space already. This is an art gallery already, and yeah, it only just expanded from there. I mean, who would have thought?
Yeah, and to kind of like, for those who haven't been to the Cigar Factory, to kind of explain how it's laid out. So we have 4 retail spaces, and then we have a main gallery for exhibiting work and doing shows and music events and things of that nature. And then the 1st and 4th floors have artist studios. The 2nd floor is just storage right now. The 3rd floor is like a small manufacturing operation. And the basement is just a conglomerate of all kinds of fun stuff. Mostly just storage, but some workspace and some street art down there now at the moment. But I mean, we had one of those 3 retail spaces. That was our initial space that we had gotten. And I mean, for us, that was at least twice as big, just the retail space alone, of the space we had just come from. the main gallery was significantly larger to what we were just using, and there were multiple walls, not just the inside, but also the hallway wall, and then all these empty walls around the building.
The walls
which
weren't
were,
cinder block this time.
Yeah.
They were not cinder block. They were drywall, a lot more appropriate for hanging normal types of artwork. So we burnt through a lot less drills. We've probably burnt through less drills in this entire 10 years being in this building than those few months just being in there.
That's a bona fide fact. I can verify that.
So, I mean, I know we stated that the AG started to really form once we got that retail space, but I think we gained our identity once we came to the Cigar Factory because it was a space dedicated to the arts. Before we had a home base, now we had a home that was built around the arts, and it served as no secondary function. It was art and art only. Well, it was supposed to be. That's part of the uphill battle we faced since then, trying to make this truly an arts building. But, we'll get into some of that later. But, once we were able to start having events and things like that, we were able to bring in more artists because we had a lot of empty studios that we were able to host more resident artists, allow people to actually work on art, which prior to coming here, the only way people really made art was outside at the hotel.
Yeah, when we did the live art on Hamilton stuff.
Yeah, which was the only art event on Hamilton at the time. There was nothing. I mean, it was truly a ghost town as far as the arts. So this became our foundation for everything that has happened since, both as far as the gallery, and I would even go as far as to say what we've been able to do with our personal projects.
Oh, absolutely.
I think the building and the neighborhood even around it gave all of us as individuals and the gallery as a whole a greater purpose by being here. It expanded the possibilities of what we even thought the gallery could be and could do.
And again, at this time, we still had no money. We were still poor. I had a lease that I signed in my name personally.
I think we're still poor.
Well, yeah, that's a spoiler. That's a spoiler, Jay. We're getting to the still poor part. Still poor in money. We got everything we need but money. Everything else we're good.
Absolutely.
But I signed a lease in my own name because the gallery had no business credit, no credit cards, nothing at that time. And I was actually kind of impressed that I was able to pass because I was kind of a screw up. I can't believe I passed the background check is whatever, but doing your security deposit, they actually do a credit check to determine how much you're supposed to give in security deposit. And somehow my credit score was good enough to get in here, which I was surprised. But I also knew that we were not going to be able to pay what we said we were going to be able to pay. So, we got in here, but it was like, yay, we're here, but oh shit, how do we make this work now? So very quickly, we fell behind on rent. And we kept pleading with the building manager and the building owner, let us stay, we're going to help out, we're going to do all this different stuff. I guess you could look back now and say, fortunately, the building superintendent at the time didn't do his job. So it opened up a path for us to do his job for him.
Right.
And then when he eventually got fired for not doing his job, it was a very easy switch over for us to take over that. So when that happened back in 2014, I believe it was, we took because we moved here in September of 2013. So we're 2 weeks away from being in this building for 10 years. Yeah.
Wow.
I know, it's insane. A decade, right? So we were only in this building for a little over a year until we struck a deal with the building owner to take over the maintenance, the cleaning, the snow removal, all the things with taking care of the building. And instead of the gallery being paid for those services, we got our space rent free. So that is the only way we've really been able to exist this whole time, is that we have this barter agreement with the building owner, which is a real estate company up in New York City that owns this building. And the building owner was happy to have artists here taking care of it because he knew they would care about it for the right reasons. And it would save him some money from having to pay people. Snow removal alone is super expensive. So that is something, again, for any artists out there, young artists, anyone struggling, trying to figure out how to make things work, just like us, you might not have money, but you might have time. You might have some skills that you might want to share. And that might be your ticket to getting a space, to doing what you want to do. This barter deal that we have with our building owner That's not a very uncommon thing with nonprofits. A lot of time, nonprofits will actually have barter deals with the building owner so that they can get their space either cheaper or completely rent-free. So, I mean, yes, it created a ton more work for us, but it also enabled us to stay here long term. And it also gave us creative control of the building, meaning the building owner was under the understanding that he couldn't come here, like, tell us we can't have certain types of music, we can't have certain types of art, he doesn't want that specific painting. We came to an understanding and agreement that he would just trust us to run this place properly. And I mean, from there, everything began to blossom. I mean, we cleaned up the basement. We brought in street artists and graffiti artists. We did these beautiful murals. It took us probably about at the time the basement was just full of garbage and junk. Probably took us about 2 years to clean that out, if not longer.
Yeah, I'd say at least 2 years just to get the basics down before we even started building out any new spaces.
Yep, we started a classroom here in one of the empty retail spaces that we continue to do art classes in this day for the neighborhood children. So on Saturday afternoons, we open up our classroom to anyone that wants to come in, but we really try to focus on the neighborhood kids here because we see it as our building needs to have a positive impact on the neighborhood directly around the building. Like, if you're not having a positive impact there first, what are you really doing? You know, like, as much as we want to help Allentown and Lehigh Valley and the world as a whole, we got to start in our neighborhood. So that's been a focus, and it's been a lot tougher. It's been a lot tougher than we expected. I mean, Rob, do you want to talk about any experiences of the neighborhood and just how it's helped and hurt us over the years, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, the neighborhood, when we first got here, the neighborhood was pretty rough. I mean, the biggest indicator to me is when we would go outside and the neighborhood kids would throw rocks at us from across the street, and then run away. And I think it like took until the first time we actually like chased one of the kids down and like had to have a talk with his guardian on their front doorstep, for like them in the neighborhood to start sort of recognizing us and like giving us a little bit more like respect and a little more leeway. And you know, I think the more we were exposed to that too, that started to shape the mission, you know, where the kids' classes really became important. We wanted to, you know, give these kids an opportunity to do something other than cause trouble. And, you know, we got more interested in cleaning up the neighborhood so that way, you know, there wasn't just trash lying around for them to throw at people or whatever. It definitely changed your perspective on things. And then, yeah, it definitely altered the growth pattern of the gallery.
I very clearly remember those kids throwing rocks. It started with them throwing rocks at cars, and then you were out front the one day, and you were telling them not to throw rocks at cars, so they started throwing rocks at you.
Yeah.
And I remember chasing their little asses several times till I finally caught one of them right outside their house, and he was begging me not to tell his mom. Begging me. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, I'll give you one chance. Tomorrow, after school, you stop by the gallery, and you come inside, and I'll show you why you should not be throwing rocks at our place. And the kid said yes, and I thought, they're not going to show up. They're not going to show up. But surprisingly, the next day, knock at the door there, and it's a bunch of kids with their little backpacks on coming right from school. They stopped by, and it was 4 or 5 of them, and they came in, and they were amazed. All the art, they never expected the building to look like what it did on the inside. Most of them have probably never really even seen art except for maybe in a book or maybe on TV. And they were so impressed. I remember that first day, they kept leaving and coming back with different groups of kids. We must have had like 15 or 20 kids through that one day. And that was our first true interaction with the neighborhood, was those kids that started by throwing rocks at us, who now were interested, and we started bringing them in to draw. And soon after, we had the arts classes going, and we would encourage them to help us clean up the trash outside and pull the weeds, and we would organize block cleanups and get 30, 40, 50 people together to pick up all the trash, you know, as far as we can go with as much time as we had. And it started to really shape some of these kids. And, you know, again, that was 10 years ago. So in that time, some of those kids that went from being like 6, 7, 8 years old to being, you know, almost adult age or older. Yeah. And since then, I've had a few of those kids cross paths with me and be like, you know, I have to thank you. Like, I can't believe you guys let us in that space, and you were so nice to me. You were the only good thing I had in my life at the time. I mean, a lot of kids in this neighborhood, they come from broken homes. They come from places that have one parent or no parents or really no one that really cares about them. You know, we've experienced kids here that they're not allowed to come home until a certain time of the night. Like I remember being a kid, I had like, you know, street lights come on or 9 p.m. There was always a certain time I had to come home. It's kind of the opposite with some of these kids we've worked with. They're not allowed to come home until a certain time. Their parents don't want to deal with them. And that could be for any number of reasons. We don't have the time to like dissect that, but I think I speak for all of us here. I think we saw it as our mission to help these kids. Because if we can't even help kids in our neighborhood, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. So again, you are right, Rob. I agree with you. As we had these interactions and experiences with these kids, it changed. It refined what we were doing and what our mission was. And, you know, it wasn't long after this that we became a nonprofit organization that was, you know, and to this day, we're a nonprofit on the state and federal levels, all volunteer run from the bottom to the top. Every single person, including myself, is a volunteer. And we do it because it's special, because it's needed. And, you know, another thing that was needed was more art events, but not just ones inside. We needed something that was more largely seen and understood. And I had great experiences going to an event here in Allentown called Mayfair when I was a kid. It used to be held down at Cedar Beach Park. And Jay and I, we actually vended the last Mayfair at Cedar Beach. It was the month before we started the gallery.
Yep.
We were handing out flyers for the opening of the Alternative Gallery in 2012. And as it did every year, it rained that Mayfair weekend. And there's a man-made lake there, and every time it rains, it floods down there. It's a major issue. And, of course, it flooded. Of course, it rained, and, of course, it flooded, right? And we were the very first booth that wasn't underwater. Remember that? We were, like, somehow spared.
Oh, yeah.
But I remember the director of Mayfair at the time, she had it. She basically resigned. Well, I think she stuck on for a year or two after that. But they moved the location up to Ag Hall at the fairgrounds. And I understand why they did what they did, but it changed what Mayfair was for so many people. And I wanted to bring that back. I wanted to have an art event down at Cedar Beach Park. I think that needed to be brought back. And a volunteer of ours at the time had said the city of Allentown was interested in there being an arts festival down there. So like, this is interesting. But when we first heard about it, it was kind of brought to us in a way that the city was already doing it and they just wanted some artists to hop on board. And then as we started talking to the city more, nothing was organized, nothing was done. So we kind of, if we wanted to do something, we had to build this from the ground up, which
still broke.
Still broke. And we're about to be a whole lot broker after this, way broker. So we, in a period of only a couple months, organized a 3-day outdoor art and music festival with 3 stages of music. What, at that time, probably 50, 60 art vendors, 10 food vendors or so. And it became known as Allentown ArtsFest. We hold it in September, or it was held in September, and unfortunately ceased running in 2019 due to the pandemic. But spoiler, we're trying to bring it back. And, you know, our Arts Fest was, again, it was this very needed thing. Artists exist in Allentown, but how do artists survive off their art in Allentown? They can't. They still can't to this day. We're still struggling to make that happen. But one of the big ways that we fix that issue was having a huge outdoor art festival. That first year, I think we brought like 7,000 or 8,000 people out, which was still huge for us. By far the biggest thing we'd ever done. But I think what was really important that first year was because we got approval for that it was either the end of May or the beginning of June. And the festival was held at the beginning of September. So 3 months after we got approval, we made this festival happen. I mean, we had to rent tents, generators, tables, chairs, and the festival was designed with the art vendor in mind so that artists, again, could exist in Allentown and make a living off their art here. And it somehow worked. The artists, they did amazing. They sold so much art, something that we, even in our own gallery and spaces that we showed in outside of our own as artists, we weren't seeing. Something about this festival was actually getting people to come out and support the arts, and we knew we were onto something. But we faced a similar problem as Mayfair, the weather. Some people jokingly called it Floodfest because year after year, ArtsFest would come and so would the rains. And the first year, the city of Allentown, they actually forced us to fence in the festival grounds because I guess there was I don't know if it was at Mayfair or something else. Someone got bit by a dog, and now no dogs were allowed, and you had to fence it in. So to fence in that proximity of square footage, I mean, it was like $16,000, $17,000 extra money. It was insane. And then I remember that first year, people were pissed off, leaving us bad comments because, oh, we walk in this park every day, but I can't bring my dog. We're happy for you to have your dog here. It's the city of Allentown that says it can't be there. Don't destroy our business's reputation because you have to walk 15 feet the other way. It's this the absurdity of humanity in this day and age. But anyways, we lost, what was it, Rob? Like $36,000?
Something like that on the first one, yeah.
The first one?
Mm-hmm.
And, the logical thing to do would be to take some time off and not do it again. Oh, but not us. Us, who already had no money, who were now $30-some thousand in debt, we're like, you know what? Let's make this an annual thing.
Let's do another one, yeah.
Let's do this, right? So we did. And we got better at it. It grew. We lost less money every year. We still lost money, but we lost less. But we only did it because we knew, number one, how necessary it was, and number two, if we weren't going to do it, nobody else was. Now, that's not to take away from Mayfair or Art in the Park or other events that were held here in the city of Allentown, but those events weren't going to grow any larger than they were, and even if they were, it wasn't enough in the number of events we were having in the city. So this was necessary. And, 2019, the last year we did it, I think, we might have broke even overall, but because we're always carrying old debt, after the 2019 festival, we were still almost $20,000 in debt, which is how we went into the pandemic, almost $20,000 in debt. And at the time, the only way that we made any kind of income was through our live shows here at the gallery, our music shows, our art exhibits, the little bit of donations we got. Because, again, it's hard to sell art here outside of ArtsFest. And, I think a lot of people just don't assume you can come to North Allentown and find people who are serious about art.
Yeah.
So the pandemic was a struggle for us in that regard, too, because we now lost our sole source of income during the pandemic. And do you remember how we survived the pandemic, Rob?
Oh, I was here for it. Yeah. Thank God for eBay.
So, you would think after years of volunteerism and helping our communities and losing money, doing these major festivals, trying to support our community and creators, we would have just one person with some money that believed in us. And I don't know if we've met that person yet. Maybe we have. Maybe they just haven't written that check. But so far, we haven't gotten that check. And the only way we survived the pandemic was because of a donation of Laserdiscs. We were contacted by a gentleman whose uncle had passed away, and he had amassed this incredible collection of Laserdiscs and VHS and DVDs and high-end players, and we had in our website that we took this kind of stuff, and he just wanted to have a good home. And he brought over, it was probably like 6 or 7 trips of this stuff in a big van. And I mean, some of the stuff was really worth money. And as much as we didn't want to sell it, at that time we were already selling everything we had at the gallery, including things from our permanent collection. I was donating personal stuff. I know Alex and Rob and even some of our other volunteers are donating personal things for us to sell on eBay, which again, yeah, thank you eBay for coming through for us in that time. Otherwise, I don't know what we would have done. But we actually sold off a good portion of that collection, and it not only kept us going, paying our bills month to month, but we paid off our debt during the pandemic.
It's wild.
Yeah, unheard of
Yes.
for any nonprofit organization.
So right now we're sitting in my office, which is essentially a massive collection of VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, Laserdiscs, movies of all formats, lifelong cinephile, surround yourself with the things you love. So when you come to the Alternative Gallery and you see what this place is, it makes perfect sense that we were saved by Laserdiscs.
Oh, absolutely.
It makes too much sense. So much sense that even as I say it now, I feel like I'm making it up. But
A lot of this story feels made up.
I know it's like so generic. I feel like there's some archangel up there just kind of like, all right, just half-assing his homework. Here you go, God. Just do what you got to do with it, right? But that's another important lesson that I want people to take from this podcast and all the hell we've gone through. You might have that plan for how you're going to make ends meet. You might think this is where we're going to get our income, but just be prepared to pivot. And I think in general, that's a lot of what nonprofits should do is they need to be ready to pivot in order to keep going, because a lot of people don't want to support nonprofits because it's not something that gives back financially. You can't invest in a nonprofit and get money back. You kind of donate because you like it, and then you go on with your life. I think with how tough the world is now as far as just like making ends meet, I don't think there's a lot of that able to go around at the moment. So it's made what we do, which was already difficult, far more difficult. So like we didn't want to spend our pandemic selling laser discs to pay old debt from a festival, but we had to do it. So I would say, like, do what you got to do. Work that side job if you have to. Work for a friend as often as you can. Like, work from home. Like, get a second job on the side. I don't want to act like I support hustle culture, because I don't. I hate hustle culture. I'm just acknowledging where we are in society. And artists don't have a lot of resources, especially independent artists who are starting out. There's not a lot of resources available to us. And do what you got to do. And don't give up. Keep it going. The best thing you can do is find someone like you, even if they're not in your hometown. Now, I want to ask the two of you this. And we're very, 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 very quickly glossing over the history of the alternative gallery here. But without what we've had the last 11 years, where do you two think you might be today? What do you think life might look like for you?
That's
It's a
tough.
loaded one.
Yeah.
Because so many of our friends and loved ones have now, they're people we've met.
Right. Yeah.
Here.
Like so much of my life is tied to the gallery after being with it so long. Like all of my closest friends are, people in one way or another affiliated with the gallery. My family has backwards integrated. A lot of them have been here for, my niece and nephews come for the art classes, and they've been to shows and things like that. Yeah, it's really hard to say, to be honest. Sometimes it's difficult to even remember what life was like before the gallery.
It was truly a different world for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think about all of the projects that I've done here, all the paintings I've made, all the memories I've made with people, and I think I'd still be, quote unquote, hustling my work. That would still be a thing, but the help that I've gotten from the people around me, I've been able to like paint with other artists and, like you guys have said, meet so many people that are so important to me still. And just jumping off of what Rob said, yeah, like it's hard to remember what life was like before we did this, because this has been our life for 11 years. And we're still, the three of us are still in this room after all of that time, which is really special.
I agree. And, I don't know where I would be at all. Life forced me back to Allentown after some issues with my family that I had to come back home and help with, or at least keep an eye on. And I always anticipated my time back home as temporary. I believe the initial idea was, we started the gallery together and then would kind of co-direct it. And then I would step away, either going back to New York or maybe Los Angeles to continue my film career and trying to make my own projects, not just working on other people's. But that's not what happened. And not that I'm upset by it, but I don't think any of us knew what we were getting into. To a degree, we did. We knew it was going to be a lot of hard work, a lot of late nights, a lot of just terrible, terrible jobs that we had to do that no one would realize, like, how hellish it was. Unsung labor, unsung heroes in some ways. But obviously this was the right path for all of us. And
Absolutely.
I think the reason that it worked is because we felt that support. We might not have always had the money to buy each other's art or support each other in that way, But how many times did we trade art, or someone needed a marker, or this material to make their art, and someone else had it. There was a lot of bartering, there was a lot of support, there was a lot of help. And I think this is kind of the crux of what artists struggle with in America. We too often, we take things that we like and we say we support them, right? A lot of people like the gallery, but I hear a lot of people saying, oh, we support the AEG and what it does, when what they're saying is they like what the gallery does, because support equates to resources. It equates to funding. It equates to help. If you're not volunteering, if you're not donating, if you're not buying a product, if you're not actively promoting us to someone and trying to get people to come here, you're not really supporting us. And I think that's what so many artists go through, is they just need somebody to support them. Friends will always want to get that discount on a piece of art. When there's a friend and family price, that shit should be more expensive, not less. Because here's what you want. I'm giving you an extra $25 on the top because I want you to succeed more than most people out there ever will. Where are those people? We need more of them. I know you're out there. Maybe you didn't think of it. But this is what we need as artists. And I guarantee you, first of all, this is going to be a big thing that I talk to artists about on this podcast, is what support looks like for them and what do they need to get more. What do they need to get to the next step? And I guarantee you, 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear artists talking about the exact same thing, about how they lack support. They have all these friends, all these family members, but they can't make their business work. Like, we need to create a society that actually supports its creators. I think so much in this society, we build up the business person and we look at artists as a bunch of screw-ups, that we don't look at the artist as a business person. And so often the artists are so focused on just trying to make their work that they're not focused on their business side of studying it, of getting better at it, nor should they have to be. I think if society valued arts enough, we would help them. The Alternative Gallery wants to be a resource where you just come here, you make your art. We make it that when you're in your studio, we keep all distractions outside those walls, because having an art studio is a luxury. Most people can't afford it. We want to have funding so artists can afford it. So when someone is here, it is our job to keep all distractions outside of this building. So if you're listening, if you know anyone that's running, any kind of creative business, help them out. Hit them up, text them, ask them what they need. I mean, what would you guys say as far as your support? Like, what does support look like for you over the years?
I think support for me over the years has been, a lot of friends and family, and luckily with those friends and family, I haven't come across the family discount thing too much, luckily, and that's kind of how I know I have good people on my side, because they do want to support me. I've even had a lot of my sales are online, like right through Instagram, right through Facebook, and there's people on there that I've never met face to face, but they commission me for a portrait or what have you, and they're giving me extra money because they want to see me succeed. And it's a pretty good feeling to get that from people that you've never even met.
That's great. I wish more artists experience that, Jay. I'm really happy that you get that.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thing that stands out to me support-wise is that the people that are willing to just to give what they have extra of. Doesn't have to be money. A lot of my support, both as a visual artist and just all of my different roles here at the gallery, were people who were willing to, dig around in a closet or go in the attic or the garage and see, what they have that they don't need anymore, that, could do well by, 1 or 100 other artists. They could have a larger impact than any of these people even imagine, just by taking some time to do some spring cleaning and dropping it off over here, as opposed to, taking it to Salvation Army or, God forbid, throwing it in the trash.
I think we are an incredible example of how you can support others even if you have no money.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a theme to this episode. I'm not sure if anyone's picked up on it,
Still
but
broke.
It's being super broke, but still getting things done.
Right.
Like, all I have, my superpower is my ambition.
I agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it.
Sometimes to my detriment, You know,
I agree with that too.
Yes, thank you.
You got it.
But I mean, like, I'm so driven and moved to see things happen that, like, now that I know how the world can be, how do I go back on that? You know? So, like, I'm curious, like, if either of you, you have any advice for, like, a young artist or someone that's starting out? I mean, because we've been through it. I don't believe everyone has to learn things the hard way. There's only so much character building we need to do. What advice can the two of you give to make life easier for a young artist? Or artists of any age that's starting out?
I would say one of the biggest pieces of advice, and I don't know if it's cliche or not, but it's just always work on your craft. Like, always, when other people are partying or, you know, going out and stuff, you work on your stuff. You're kind of just immersed in it all of the time. And I think that creates a lot of growth. And you find that you grow with your work over time, that it might change, but you just got to stick with it. You got to let the process kind of tell you where to go.
Yeah, and I would say that you always need to find a way to create, find a way to express yourself. You know, even if you're in a situation where you can't afford paints and brushes and canvas and things like that, you know, art was being created centuries before paintbrushes and canvases were created.
Millennia.
Yeah, you know, grab a stick and start drawing in the dirt if you have to, but do something creative on a regular basis as much as you can. And you know, you'll get back to that point where you do have, you know, materials that you can be a little more proud of, and you have more flexibility with those things. But in the times that you can't, do as much as you can. Keep that part of your brain active. You know, get that muscle memory going, and prepare yourself for the time when you do have those opportunities, and you can make the best of them then.
What about something very specific, like young artists or new artists who are starting to go out and vend? What advice do you have from them? Because that's the real tricky thing. People, they don't really have what they need or the experience to know what to bring. What do you think as far as that, Rob?
You know, the best thing I can tell for any artist who is interested in vending for the first time, plan out your setup, plan out your table, set it up in your, you know, wherever you have enough space to do it. Set it up exactly like it's going to be at the event, and then point the biggest, strongest fan you have directly at it. Because wind will always send your work flying. Wind will damage your work. Wind will force you to give work away for free as it goes flying off into the sky. Get prepared for all scenarios, weather related, especially when you're going out there to vend.
The rain, though.
Yeah, so definitely bring those windbreakers.
Absolutely.
And yes, weather in general is a big thing to contend with. I think a simple thing that people always forget is bring a chair.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah.
You know, might not seem, oh, you're young, you're strong, you get energy. Okay, try standing for 9 hours and then see how strong you are. We need time to relax and rest. And if you're too busy struggling just to have the energy to be there, you're not going to be your sharpest with communicating with someone. And I think we can all agree here that a lot of the times when we're making an art sale, it's because someone's probably connecting with our work based on what we're telling them about ourselves or maybe even that piece of work. And I think another thing is bring change. Even if
Yes.
it's $25.
Yeah, or maybe this day, you know, this day and age, you know, sign up for all the services, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, you know, every single way that you could possibly find to accept money from someone, come equipped with it, because there will always be someone asking if you accept this and not that.
Yeah, and I would recommend overall the best point of sale system used would be Square. I know it's like 3 cents per transaction, I think 10% per transaction. So it's incredibly cheap. There's no yearly fee. You don't have to have any special equipment. You can take it right on your iPhone or your Android or any phone you have. There's an app for it. I got sick of the dongles with the credit card swiper, so I just punch in the number manually if I have to. There are a number of different ways. But, I mean, it makes your day easier when you can take a sale and be on to the next person. And you might be able to make more sales in that day. Like, people are fickle. don't underestimate someone's potential to no longer want your work the second they walk away from that table.
Oh yeah, you got to make it as easy as possible for people to pay you.
So I'd say it's less a hustle than it is almost like a con. Like, you got to get these people while you can, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm curious, like, it is 11 years in, we haven't even scratched the surface of what the gallery is or what we've done, but I'm wondering if there are any standout moments that the two of you would like to talk about.
There's so many. I think ArtsFest is one of them because it was such a gigantic undertaking that took so many people. And to see it all come into fruition and see, like, 8,000 people, and just seeing it, like, in my hometown in that way, it was incredible. And to know that, like, that happened because of just a small group of people, and then that small group grew into a larger group of volunteers and people who also wanted to see this thing happen. And yeah, just sitting back that first day and seeing, oh my God, we made it. Like, this is real right now. Definitely a standout moment.
And I think it should be noted, too, that ArtsFest, when we started in 2014, we had about 7,000 people, I think. By 2019, it had grown to about 35,000 in attendance. So in 4 or 5 years, we grew that much.
There's just an absolute need for it.
Yes, there is. Rob, how about you? Any standout moments you want to think of and talk about?
Yeah, so there's a little stretch of time in the gallery's development that I like to call the Attitude Era.
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
And I think that was the time frame when we were hearing those people, like we were talking about earlier, who weren't taking us seriously, who were calling us punks and a clubhouse and all of these other things. And we sort of leaned into that, but we did it in a way that let them know that we weren't going anywhere. So we did things like You're Not Invited, the band artwork show. We brought out the ideas like Pervert, the burlesque stuff that we did. All of those types of things, we started getting into some of like the music shows and stuff like that, and we really sort of dug our feet in to sort of tell people, like, art doesn't have to be the way you're doing it. We're going to continue to do it, and we're going to have fun doing it. This is our style. Get used to it. That was that whole sort of era, that stretch of a couple years there, I think really did a lot to help define the gallery's image and like the general vibe that the gallery takes on when you come in here.
Totally agree with all of that. Very cool.
Yeah, I, like anyone else, we've grown and we've matured. We were a bunch of 20-somethings who started this gallery with no money, no experience, probably thought it wasn't going to last, even though we hoped it would. Almost didn't last on quite a number of occasions. But we got more serious. As serious as we were even in the beginning, we've gotten somehow more serious. And I think that's because our understanding of art and life has deepened. And, where we used to consider ourselves maybe just an art gallery or a music venue, I now look at what we do more of as a cultural organization. I understand the general culture that exists around art. I understand cultures that exist around certain mediums of art. I work with the Museum of Indian Culture here in Allentown. I'm actually on their board of directors now. Like, that's been intensely beautiful for me to be allowed into these cultures and seeing these things. The Anthony Bourdains of the world showing how food is a window into culture has truly opened my eyes to what culture is and how important it is. And also, a lot of people think culture is stationary, that it's set in stone, and that it's there forever. When in reality, culture is usually ever changing. And sometimes something that's here today is gone tomorrow. And then you're regretting that you didn't get more involved or support it or get to see it. And again, I think that kind of ties into support. Like, if you want to have a beautiful, vivid world full of amazing things, you have to support them. I mean, who else is going to be crazy enough like we are and just go year after year without being paid, with fighting being in debt, with, I'm going to say it, like, we as an arts organization and cultural organization, we exist in a city that really isn't supportive of the arts. I know they're trying to be more supportive, but I don't think they understand how to do that, even when we tell them directly. I think they eventually will come around to it, but I mean, we're already 11 years in. You know, and Jay, you mentioned it earlier in this conversation. We had to create our own opportunities. We all recognized that we were stuck here in Allentown or the Lehigh Valley, and we had these things that we were, you know, maybe these talents or these gifts that we wanted to harness and spend our time and focus on, but life got in the way of. Job, family, you know, how many times did you hear people tell you get a real job? You know,
all the time.
Now I try to turn it on its head. Like anytime someone's not an artist, I'm like, well, what are you, a lawyer? Get a real job, dude.
Yeah, right.
Come on. Oh, a doctor. Okay, doctors. That's a real
Pull them
job.
slide.
Real doctors are a real job. Like, thank you, doctors and
We love
pilots.
doctors
and
here.
yeah, doctors are great. Thank you so much because, you know, we get to live longer lives now because of doctors and technology.
I love doctors.
I know. And I feel like because it's taken me so long to get to where I want to be, I'm hoping for that technology to keep me alive long enough to... I personally want to be like 200 years old making films. So
Amazing.
now, speaking of the future, what would you guys like to see for the future of the AG? Rob, what does the perfect future of the AG look like to you?
The perfect future for the AG. I think that first and foremost, you know, I think that we need to definitely get control fully of the building that we're in and begin to shape it in the way that we really want to. Once we are able to finish molding this building into exactly what it should be, I'd like to see the alternative gallery kind of franchise, for lack of a better word. You know, I'd like to see an alternative gallery facility in every, you know, emerging city in the United States, where as soon as the resources for creativity are becoming available and the need for creativity is there, the alternative gallery has an office down there that is, you know, finding artists, putting them in the places where they need to be, getting them resources, you know, helping them increase their talents and getting them up to a level where they can start doing large mural projects or, you know, intense design work for companies or whatever it is that the need for art is calling for. You know, have everyone in the United States have those same opportunities that we're trying to make here in Allentown right now. That's really where I'd like to see us go.
That's an awesome answer, and I wanna talk about some of that after. Jay, do you have something you want to say?
When you said that, the first thing that came to mind is the kids' classroom and all the work that we do with kids. I know Rob has a bike program that you do with the neighborhood kids.
Earn a bike program.
Earn a bike
yep.
program.
Yeah.
And I just think things like that are so special to like focus on like those that will come after us and putting energy into them and just seeing those kids grow is like incredible. So seeing more of that, I definitely would love to see ArtsFest come back in a bigger and better way, and I think that we can do it. And yeah, like Rob said, and like we've talked before about like the AG growing beyond this building, beyond us, and just the idea of it growing beyond us and like people that will come after us, like giving them a chance and hope to be able to do some of the same things that we've done and do it better.
Yeah, I mean, great points on both of your parts there, and you know, I like what you said there, Rob, about like the franchising. Like that's, I think, always been nagging at the back of my mind is that this is so special. Why just have it here? I want to see an alternative gallery or an equivalent in every city and town in the world. I'm not saying it has to be called alternative gallery. I don't care about that. What I'm saying is that every city and town has creatives, and every creative person needs a spot to go to. They need their own place, whether it's their own studio or a communal gathering space for creatives. And I mean, we've, you know, in the last year, we as a gallery crew have started traveling to other cities to go and investigate what their art scene is like, what their art community is like. We want to come back inspired. And I don't want to talk about specific places at the moment, but I just want to speak kind of generally when I say that more often than not, I'm coming back kind of disappointed because I'm hoping to come back with this grand answer that fixes everything here back home. But instead, I'm there saying, hell, these guys need what we have. If they had an organizing body, if they had a group of artists working together, if they had people that weren't going to take no for an answer and get things done no matter what, they would have what we have. It might not look like our building or feel like our building, but it would have the same spirit of what we do. Because even if we were to open up another location, say in New Orleans or Miami or anywhere in the country, it wouldn't look like this one. It would be fine-tuned to wherever that is. So this is a big thing that I want to point out in this conversation, is that if you want to get involved with what we do, if you want to learn from what we do, please reach out to us, because I am happy to talk to anyone who wants to start up their own space. I want to save you time. I want to save you trouble. I want to kick ass with you, because without that, we're kind of stuck on our own. And eventually you do hit a wall. You do run out of steam. I'm a big believer that inspiration needs inspiration. It doesn't matter how talented you are. If you don't have the motivation to get up and do something, it's probably not going to get done. And it shouldn't just be on you as an individual. I think this is a communal effort. And a big thing is we're trying to help American society understand why the arts are important outside of the obvious things, and how to support artists. I mean, right now we have the double strike going on out in Hollywood because, you know, artists aren't being supported, writers aren't being supported, they're not getting their cut. You know, they're facing potential job loss due to machines easily, what they say is easily replacing their jobs. And I want creators to follow their dreams. You know, if you want to start your own space, again, reach out to us. Ask how to do that. Ask where the best possible location is. Because I guarantee you, if you need something and you know artists, you coming together is the first major step into making all of that happen. And Rob, if you can see us popping up in any city, what do you think? What city you'd like to be in?
Me personally, I would have to say Seattle, Washington. I think is a great match for us, both in what we could do for Seattle and what Seattle could do for the Alternative Gallery.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any city pop in your mind, Jay?
Miami. Yeah, I'm a little partial to that, but
yeah,
it's just seeing like how much, how many talented artists there are there, and just you kind of see the same style work kind of over and over, and there's not too much that strays from that, but the stuff that strays is like so good, and I would love to see a space or spaces down there that cater more to that.
Yeah, we took that trip to Art Basel last year, and Wynwood. We spent most of our time in Wynwood, which was awesome. But, you know, as outsiders without any connections there, to me, it didn't feel like there was an overall organizing body,
No,
which was,
definitely
again, very similar to what we faced here
Right.
in Allentown. For me, I would love to have a space in New Orleans. New Orleans is near and dear to me. You know, they say the only American invention is jazz. You know, just a good saying, not necessarily true. And New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz. And when I went and visited there a few years ago for the first time, I came back a different person. And that's one of the places, even with their issues, you know, they have, you know, unfortunately high rates of crime, which seems to be the case with like truly creative areas. I don't know why. I felt like, first of all, I brought a piece of New Orleans back with me, but not only did I want to be there, but I wanted to help influence in this different way, because I feel like, you know, as much as you see some street art and murals in New Orleans, like I didn't really see anything dedicated to street art or any of the styles that we kind of cater to. And if I'm wrong, anyone that's listening, it wants to point out that I'm wrong, please point it out, because I'm going to be taking a trip to New Orleans again soon. I want to visit these spaces. I want to meet these people. I want to collaborate. It's not even about me starting something in New Orleans. I'm just so amazed by going there that I want to be a part of it. I want to collaborate. And if I can help in any way, great. And if I can just be a spectator, that's also great. So With that being said, is there anything else that pops into mind as far as standout moments in the AG's history that maybe could be beneficial to artists? Because again, I want this podcast to help those artists that might have no one behind them.
Kind of going back to what you said about the most important part is finding like-minded people and connecting and actually having conversation. Like, make sure you're doing these things in person. It's important to find like-minded people to be able to like move forward, because doing it on your own is just, it's an option, but it's not the road you want to take. You want to do this with people who want the same things as you.
You know, I think a good specific example of that is when we had to go to city council about, the variance for live shows here at the Alternative Gallery. Again, broke. Didn't have anything behind us except for all of our supporters, and that was probably the one time that the city council chambers has ever been packed to the point where people had to stand in the back and wait outside just so that they could vote to allow us to have live music. Because if you have enough people behind you, that is support. Show up, raise your hand, at the right time to show that you want something to happen in your city, and it'll happen. You get enough hands in the air and it will happen.
And that's a great point too, because I've been telling people this recently in conversation, but I've been reading about how like post World War II, because the middle class was so strong, most households only had to have one person working, and it was enough income to sustain the entire family. And because of that, people had a lot of free time. And because of that, people actually joined a lot of civic organizations, different groups. So these civic organizations not only had high memberships, but the members were very active. They were well organized. And because of this, they were kind of a force, right? And local politicians and even politicians on the state and federal levels, they would often make decisions in the favor of these civic organizations, because these civic organizations, they had pull, they had power. And as that middle class started to be worn down over the decades, there went those memberships and their power. And a lot of times politicians no longer were making decisions to benefit the middle and lower class, but often special interest groups, which is, no matter what side you fall on, I think everyone can agree American politics right now, it's completely run by special interest groups. And I think we need to bring back those organizing bodies in our community. I mean, we did it recently here in the city with an issue. We organized the artists and we got some changes done in the city that were affecting us, and it worked. We got a letter done. We got it signed by 100 artists. We gave it to the mayor, and within a week, the mayor had enacted the changes we had asked for. So that, to me, showed us the power of organizing. And that's what has to happen. Don't think that you're out there on your own, because as weird as you think your style of art is or your medium, I guarantee you there are other people out there doing it as well.
Absolutely.
And they are looking for you. And if you guys can work together, you're now not just one. You're at least 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 50. And if you suck at business, start by asking a family member, can you help us out? Do you know anything about accounting? Do you know anything about contracts or this or that? Just ask. Talk to anybody who will listen about your art and the thing you're trying to do. Because oftentimes you already have all the resources you need. They're just kind of scattered about and people aren't aware you need them. So that is my message to people, is to organize, and the resources are out there. Money isn't the only resource. It makes things a hell of a lot easier, but it is not the only thing you need. You guys agree with that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%.
Anything else you want to contribute to the conversation here before we send off?
I'm just happy people want to listen to our story, and hopefully they feel inspired by it.
Yeah. If you're in one of those cities that needs that creative like spark, and you want to get it going, you just don't know how, look us up, the Alternative Gallery on Facebook. Send us a message, send us an email, stop by, take a road trip down here. We'll help you out. Let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And our space, I think I speak for everyone that's been here. You kind of have to see it to fully understand it.
I agree with it.
And if you can make a trip here, we're not always here to give the full in-depth tour, but if you happen to catch us, I think it'll be very eye-opening. And we want this podcast, again, to not only, we want it to help creators, of course, but I don't want this podcast just to be for artists. I want this podcast to help people understand what artists go through, what it takes to support an artist, what it takes to understand the needs of certain cultures. Because in doing so, we're going to be a lot more supportive, not just of that specific art or culture, but I think of art and culture in a greater way. It's been a great episode with my co-founders here, and I'm really glad that we got to share not only this time together in the podcast, but these 10 plus years. And I'm sure it's going to be many more.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
Indeed.
not as broke as the first 10 plus. I think good things are coming, and we look forward to interacting with listeners and different collaborators who this podcast might reach who weren't aware of us previously. And we hope that your story can inspire us in the same way that we hope to inspire you. Hope you enjoyed your visit to the Art Bazaar. See you next time.